Conservative.
You,
This end.
you're here.
And I get this mic and I stick it on my lapel.
We'll get someone will mic you up.
Someone will do that for me.
Yeah, so you'll just
Right, and that's about an hour, is it?
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the USSU question time. I'm Matthew East, and I'll be chairing tonight's event. We're here in the University of Salford's Media City UK campus, and we are also in the constituency of Salford and Eccles. All 5 candidates here tonight will be running in the general election on the 7th of May to become a Member of Parliament. So here they are. To my right is Emma Van Dyke. She's standing for the Green Party. She's got interested in politics due to the NHS privatisation and budget cuts. Moving on, we have Rebecca Long-Bailey. She is standing for the Labour Party. She used to be a solicitor with the NHS and has decided to run as a candidate due to inequality and the destruction of the NHS. Joined there is Charlie Briggs. He's standing for the Liberal Democrats. He owns his own engineering supply company and has been for 14 years, and was the leader of Burnley Council. Then we have Greg Downs. He's a vicar for 18 years. He studied politics at university and decided that now is the right time to run as a candidate, and he is standing for Conservatives. And finally we have Seamus Martin, who's standing for UKIP. And he's standing for UKIP because it's the party which represents small government. And beforehand, he worked as a translator and an immigration officer. So, welcome to question time for all of you. If you are following us online, the Twitter is #USSUQT. And can we please have our first question from Michelle Said?
And what are you going to do to change that?
So why are young people so disengaged in politics, and what are you going to do to change that? I'll be working my way round. Emma, do you want to start off?
Well, I think that young people have become disengaged in politics because politicians have become disengaged from them. I believe that the mainstream politics isn't paying attention to the needs of young people, of education and jobs to the degree that they should be. And the Green Party means to re-engage with students by asking you what you want and working for you to help you in any way we can. We have our main policies of eliminating tuition fees and of the £10 minimum wage by 2020, as well as other beneficial elements as well.
Okay, I'm going to move along and ask Rebecca, why do you think young people are...
Well, I think for the first time in my lifetime, we've got a generation of young people that are likely to do worse than their parents. My parents brought me up in Old Trafford and pushed me in the hope that I would do better than they did, coming from a working class background, and I was lucky. I did. Unfortunately, a lot of my peers didn't, and they fell through the cracks of a system that should have been there to pick up on their talents and abilities. And worse is happening today. I mean, children joining primary school can be up to 18 months behind their better off classmates before they've even started in life. And then you've got £9,000 a year worth of tuition fees, putting a whole generation of young people off going to university. You've got large swathes of young people not going to university when they should be pushed into technical vocations, and again falling through the cracks of a system that should be picking up on their abilities and strengths. So the Labour Party is going to work hard to change that. We're going to encourage more vocational training in schools. We're going to introduce a technical baccalaureate to encourage those that don't go to university into more technical and skilled vocations. We're going to reduce tuition fees to £6,000 a year, and in my view that's a start. But most importantly, what we're going to do as a party is we're going to try to rebalance the economy. For years and years we've seen a group of people increasing in wealth during this recession, so that we've got to the stage today where 1% of the country owns 48% of the nation's wealth. That's staggering, and we've got a gap between rich and poor that's growing at a faster rate than it was in the Victorian era.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off slightly and move on to Charlie. What do you think? Why do you think people disengage in politics?
Because the leading politicians are not on they're not on my planet. I'm a working class lad, and I've been there and done it. I've just lost my wife And I can't believe some of the things what I've just heard there from the Labour Party when 5 years ago they wrote a letter, Liam Bryan wrote a letter, "Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid there is no money. Kind regards and good luck." The Labour Party actually bankrupt this country, and they have the cheek now to try to, push us back to where we were before.
Wasn't it the failed capitalism that destroyed this country and destroyed the banking, that caused the banking crisis, and not the Labour Party?
Well, obviously I will disagree with you on that. I am disillusioned that my party had to go into a coalition. I'm very disillusioned because I thought that my party could actually run this country and make a better job of it than the Labour Party did. But unfortunately, we did have to go into a coalition, and I think what we've done in the coalition has made this country better than what it were.
Right,
You're not high in the credibility stakes,
to let
unfortunately.
everybody else have a say first. I'll work round to these people, they can speak, and then you'll have a chance to argue against the points which have been made. Then I'll come to the audience. So if the audience can please be quiet for now, you will get your chance to speak. And you will all get a chance to respond to other points made. But if I may proceed to Greg, why do you think young people are so disengaged in politics?
I think my first thought in answering the question was the famous graffiti that says, "Don't vote, the government always get in." And I think there's a lot of voter apathy because what it seems as if whichever party's in, just speaking honestly now, there doesn't seem to be change. That's the perception out there. So there's a distrust, wholesale distrust in politicians of whatever stripe. And I think actually, without getting partisan, it's a shame Rebecca went straight for the partisan thing there. Without getting partisan, I think we've all got a job to do, all of us who seek to be in public life, to rebuild public confidence in politics, see it as a noble thing, and possibly a force for good and a force for change in the nation.
Right. And Seamus, why do you think
Thank you, Matt.
young people
If I could just point out before I address the actual question that I'm actually the candidate for a neighbouring seat very south because our local candidate, Paul Doyle, here in Salford and Eccles is recovering from an operation at the moment and can't be with us tonight. Turning to the question, I think that young people have become increasingly disengaged from politics because until very recently it didn't really matter which party you voted for. It was just two sides of the same coin that got in. We had the insincerity and spin of the Blair years combined with the lies that got us into the Iraq War, which I think disillusioned a whole generation. And then that was followed by the self-proclaimed heir to Blair, David Cameron, who has pursued similar policies. So it doesn't really matter. It hasn't really mattered until recently whether you voted Labour or Conservative because you just got variations on a theme. I think that things have changed in recent years, particularly with the European elections last year, where because of the different voting system, people could vote with their heart, vote for the party they really wanted, and we saw a breakthrough for the Greens and for ourselves in UKIP. And I think that's actually going to translate into a much more engagement for young people at the general election now, despite the first past the post system, because a lot more young people, particularly young people who haven't gone to university, are getting energised and becoming politically involved now. And I think that's a great source for hope.
Right, I'm going to have to stop you there, otherwise we won't have time. I'm going to give the candidates a chance to respond to some points made, but I would also like to point to the second half of the question, which is how would you change disengagement? So, Rebecca, I feel you want to say something.
Case in point made, I think a lot of young people are losing faith in politicians and political representatives because they're not offering hope and they're not putting bold and radical policies on the table. And we've had 3 representatives to the left of me who have gone into a tirade attacking other parties rather than stating what their parties are going to offer young people.
Either of you want to respond?
Well, it wasn't a tirade. It was simply saying that I think that it was a shame that it was you that was being partisan in terms of party politics there, Rebecca. My point was simply that I think all politicians of every stripe need to take some responsibility for the disillusionment that there is in politics. That was my point simply. So it wasn't a
But
tirade.
what's your party going to do for young people? How are they going to engage the youth?
One of the things that I think all of us need to take seriously of all the political stripes is engaging young people. And one of the things that I think the Conservative Party has sought to do is create the best possible economic conditions whereby young people can get jobs.
Please.
And surely that's fundamental in terms of human dignity, in terms of people thriving, and in terms of people prospering. Nothing could be more important than that, surely.
Right, but Emma, you wanted to say
Yes,
something?
I've already stated a couple of Green Party's policies that will help young people, but I also wanted to mention that we do have our own youth section of the party, the Young Greens, and anyone who is a member of the Green Party can come along to our conferences and vote on our policies, put forward new policies. It is an entirely democratic process from the grassroots up. So anyone who wants to get involved in politics, who wants to join the Green Party and make our policies, can come along and do that. And that, I think, is different from most other parties.
I think that a lot of the onus lies on young people themselves to get involved. Lots of political parties pander to pensioners for the very simple reason that pensioners vote. They come out and vote in very large numbers. So it's the squeaky wheel that gets oiled. And you know, I'm middle-aged now, but once I was young. In fact, once I was sitting where you were sitting, because I'm actually a former Salford student myself. So you know, it's all very well saying nothing's going to change, and you know, the political parties aren't doing anything for us as young people. But if you want things to change, you've got to be part of that change and get involved with the party of your choice. You know, whatever political leanings you may have, step up to the
I'm going to
plate.
stop you there and allow Charlie to respond
Yeah,
to the second half of the question, how to get people involved.
Well, we have the Young Liberals, and I do think it's important that the political parties, no matter who they are, should go into schools and should start educating the kids from an early age, but not trying to brainwash them, not trying to force them into, oh, vote for us, we'll do this for you, we'll do that for you. What they should be doing is having politics on a broad scale. Then all the children know that there is a political stance they have to make at one stage of their life. Now, just talking about myself personally, and I'll be very fast. I was a Labour man for many, many, many years until Mr. Blair took us to war in Iraq for oil. My son was in the army, and when you sat there at home, and there was a part where he was in Iraq, and some of his comrades were killed. They were surrounded and massacred. And when you sat there for 12 hours waiting for that knock on that door through politics, then you can understand where I am.
Right, okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. So if you raise your hand if you have any points to make. Yes?
Would you like to answer the first part of the question that the young lady asked in the first place? Just why are the youth not engaged in politics? And not one of you, said the lady from the Green Party, has bothered to answer that.
So, Rebecca, do you want to retort and we'll work our way around? Why do you think young people are disengaged?
Well, as I've said, we've got a generation of young people that are likely to do a lot worse than their parents, and they've lost hope. They've lost hope in our economy, and they've lost hope in their future, because what we've got at the moment is a political and capitalist system that isn't offering them any hope. And that's why the Labour Party is committed to changing that. It's committed to rebalancing the economy and ensuring that those with the broadest shoulders bear the greatest burden, not allowing tax avoidance on a massive scale. So we've got up to £85 billion a year going out of the country every year that should be going back into the public purse.
Again, I think I said that we've been fed, and the children have been fed lies and more lies for many, many years, and that has got to change. You can't keep feeding people lies. All of a sudden, you'll have a bit of a revolution on your hands. And I'm sorry, the revolution's here now, and we've got to change the stance. We've got to be more truthful than what we actually are.
And Greg, what would you say?
And I think I did answer it, but to take it a little further, I do think there's an issue of character. So I think people going into public office sadly often fail to exhibit the character that we would expect of people. So the whole expenses scandal, which I realise was not the monopoly of any one party, I think that was huge in causing disillusionment and disaffection among people. So I think we do need to be encouraging people of character to enter public life.
Seamus?
Yeah, I think that the young people are facing a very difficult time these days. You know, there's such insecurity of employment. So many people, especially young people, either don't have a job at all, they only get part-time work, they're in zero-hour contracts, and there's a huge pressure on wage for so many people, especially young people. Minimum wage has become the maximum wage, and we've got to ask ourselves why. And it's really, I think, down to the party that's supposed to represent working people, the Labour Party, betraying their own young people by opening the door to mass immigration from Eastern Europe under the EU. Now, that's not to complain at all about the people that have come here themselves. You know, they've shown great get up and go by getting up and going from a bad situation and coming here. But the Labour Party opened the door when they didn't need to, when they were in power. France and Germany said, you can't come here for 7 years. Britain, under Labour, opened the door, let them all in. So now there's pressure from the unemployed of the EU. You know, there's mass unemployment in Spain, Italy.
Stop, yeah, because we're running out of time. You made some allegations, Labour. Do you very briefly want to respond to those?
Well, I wondered how long it would take UKIP to blame immigrants for the current economic crisis.
We're
that
not
we're
blaming
in.
immigrants,
We're
we're
only a few
blaming
minutes into
Labour
the debate.
for uncontrolled mass
Can we
immigration.
just let
Big
Rebecca
distinction
finish
there.
her point, and then we'll move on to another question.
I think some of the points that my colleagues have made about losing faith in politicians and the way that they come from a certain class of people is certainly true. And I think it's important that we work very hard to get more people from working class backgrounds into politics and people from black and ethnic minorities into politics because they're underrepresented.
Sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off as letting you respond to the point about immigration, but I do need to move on to the next question. I believe our next question is from Jess James. Yeah.
If you were to vote on whether England should abolish tuition fees, which way would you vote and why?
Right, well, we'll start off at this end this time. So, Seamus.
Okay. Well, it's official UKIP policy to abolish tuition fees immediately for people who are studying STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine, provided that they undertake to stay and work in this country and pay taxes in this country for at least 5 years after they graduate. Ideally, we would like to roll that out across the board. I mean, tuition fees are free in Germany, one of the most successful economies in Europe. If they can do it, we should be able to do it as well.
Right, and Greg, do you want to?
When my father went to university, the percentage of the population was a fraction of what it was today, something like 7% back in his day. Now it's in the 40%. That's something that we can be proud of, that as a nation, such a significant number of the population of this nation go into higher education. To have that as free, I think economically it's not sustainable. Most of the parties recognise that. But also just in terms of fairness, I don't think it's unfair to expect students to pay something for the higher education that goes beyond normal tertiary education. So I think there's a kind of a fairness issue there, and for that reason I wouldn't vote to abolish them.
Right, and Charlie?
Obviously when the tuition fees came out, I was against it because I didn't think it was fair. Coming from, like I say, a working class background, my family could not afford to send anybody to university, and I'd off my cap to you people here, because I think you're tremendous in that you have set yourselves aside and you gain this education. So I'll take my cap off there. But the problem you've got is that obviously somebody's got to pay for it. And if the country is bankrupt, no matter what and the reasons why it's bankrupt, then somebody has to find some money from somewhere. Now, I know the fees rose and it was a little bit silly, but listening to academics now, when they're saying if the Labour Party get in charge and they're going to drop the tuition fees, where are we going to find that money from? Because we can't fund it. And our education system in the universities is going to go down and down and down. So where do we go? What do we do? I'm sorry, but somebody has to pay for it from somewhere. And unfortunately, it lays on your doors.
Fair enough. Rebecca?
Well, my own personal view is always that education should be 100% free. Now, the Labour Party policy at the moment is to reduce tuition fees to £6,000, and the reason for this is because we have to deal with the economy in the state that we find it on May the 8th, if we're lucky enough to get into power. Now, as I've already mentioned, and I sound like a bit of a broken record in talking about rebalancing the economy, but it all boils down to this. We have got a strict and stringent financial plan in place that will close tax avoidance loopholes. It will ensure that the wealthiest pay their fair share in tax and that that money is put back into the public purse. And I'm hopeful that in years to come, we can reduce the £6,000 even further. So it's certainly a starting point. Now, in terms of how we're going to fund that £6,000 reduction, we've already stated that we're going to remove the tax-free allowance on those pension allowance on those earning over £150,000. So we've clearly stated how we're going to fund that pledge.
Right, okay. And Emma, would you vote for?
I've already said that, yes, I would vote to abolish tuition fees. And the reason why is the Green Party believes that education is a right, that everybody deserves to have the opportunity to study and learn and improve themselves. And in answer to where we would get the money from, we do have a fully costed manifesto to be released at the end of this month or early next month, I believe. It will include changes to the tax system, a progressive tax system, a financial transaction tax, and wealth tax, all of which combined would be distributed to public services, including education, the NHS, renationalisation of the railways, etc., etc.
Right, okay. Any questions from the floor? We'll go down here first and then look at some others.
This is a good question to Mr. Downs. Did you go to university?
I did.
Did you pay for university?
I think I was on the cusp where tuition fees were being introduced. But like I was saying earlier, I think since I was at university, I'm 46 now, you know, significantly, a massively significant percentage of the population now are at university. So there's the sustainability question, you know, as that sector has mushroomed and grown.
I just find it very absurd that the politicians who voted to raise tuition fees never had to pay tuition fees.
Right, okay.
Absolutely absurd.
Did I see some other hands up? Yes, at the back there in the leather jacket.
This one's mostly to Mr. Downs, though any candidate can answer if they wish. You're mentioning about fairness. Welsh students actually get a subsidy, a grant from the Welsh Government of £5,500 on which they can study anywhere in the UK. Firstly, would you say that this is fair? And secondly, does this not say that reduced prices are actually sustainable for the economy?
Right, we'll go to Greg first and then we'll answer the rest of it.
I think taking the bigger picture of the United Kingdom, particularly with significant powers post-devolution, then the picture we have clearly isn't one of fairness, is it? So I'm surprised you didn't mention the example of Scotland, obviously, where tuition fees... Sorry? Yeah, no, but you didn't mention the situation of Scotland, where the tuition fees are not a feature there in terms of education being, higher education being a free thing. So if we look at the United Kingdom, the bigger picture, there isn't equality, you know, because of the devolution that we have. In terms of looking at the example of somewhere like Scotland, I know you mentioned Wales, where tuition fees are not passed on to the student. I think given the population of Scotland compared to England, it's a different scenario, and therefore it's more feasible in that context than it is in the most populous part of the United Kingdom, which is England.
James, how do you think?
Yeah, well, you know, I think we've had plenty of money to bail out the fat cat bankers. We've had plenty of money to bomb Iraq and other places. I think that money would be much better spent investing in you, our young people. With regard to the different parts of the United Kingdom, it's free or subsidised in some places, and here, if you're a student from or in England, you have to pay for it, and many of you will be graduating with more than £40,000 of debt in student loans. That's just an example of the great inequalities that exist in the country now through what's known as asymmetrical devolution. that if you live and work and pay taxes in England, like many of you do, or your parents do, you are subsidising all these freebies in other parts of the United Kingdom. So Labour and Conservatives and now the Lib Dems who are in coalition, they have really neglected England. Who speaks for England? We've got a Welsh Assembly,
So
we've
just
got
to
the Scottish
ask,
Parliament.
would your party get rid of the Scots, the Welsh and the Northern Irish as freebies, as you put them, or would you give them to England?
We will put an end to the taxpayers of England paying through the nose to subsidise the other parts of the United Kingdom. Equality and fairness for all parts of the United Kingdom. And if the Scots get free prescriptions and free student tuition and free care for the elderly, that's all well and good, but it's you and your parents here in England that are paying for it. That's not right.
Okay,
that's not fair.
Just a point of information. I don't think those devolved powers can now be taken back in terms of the process of devolution, so I don't think that's something that you could do.
Okay, but Charlie, where do the Lib Dems stand on tuition fees? I know there's been some controversy in the past 5 years over
Well, I don't have to say, do I, where we stand on it. But again, if we were in government on our own, we wouldn't have done it. We were against the tuition fees. But because we went into a coalition, obviously, and we were the minor party, we had to obey the rules. I am not in favour of tuition fees, and I don't think somebody should get something for free and other people shouldn't. Everybody should be equal, and that's my own personal opinion.
My own personal view is that there shouldn't be a postcode lottery for education, and I think within the party we'll certainly be working towards addressing that issue in line with, mentioning the economy again, ensuring that we can not just offer £6,000 a year, but we can reduce that even more.
Okay, and Emma?
And I believe that we should all have the equal right to the free tuition fees, free prescriptions, and no postcode lottery as well. I think it should all be at the best standard, not bringing anyone down to the lower standard just to make it fair.
So
Bring
the
everyone up
Greens
to the
would
best standard.
Give England free prescriptions and
Yeah.
free tuition, right? Yes, you there.
Isn't it quite simple, really, where you get the money from to pay for the poorest people's education? And that is from the multinational companies that are working here in the UK, avoiding tax. So just simplify the tax laws so people pay what they have to pay, and then there's the money.
Okay, Emma, do you want? And we'll work our way around.
Basically, yes.
Okay, fair enough. Rebecca?
I mean, we've got a crime happening before our very eyes, and unfortunately, it's only now that we're recently waking up to what's happening. I mean, multinational companies and wealthy individuals have been avoiding tax for decades. The free market was opened up in the 1980s, and there was a gold rush. People were getting away with murder, and now we're starting to realise what's happened. Then you've seen the HSBC scandal in the last month or so, where there've been offshore bank accounts that people have been turning a blind eye to. It's absolutely shocking. And I mentioned the figure 80 billion. That's the tip of the iceberg. That's an estimation. I think it's far greater than that. And if we crack down on this tax avoidance, then we could have untold billions of pounds coming back into the public coffers, where we can bolster the NHS, provide free education, and give people the future and the investment that they deserve.
So would Labour tax properly the people that give donations to your party?
Would we tax properly? Well, yeah, exactly. If we're going to advocate having a stringent financial system where those with the broadest shoulders have the greatest burden, then yes, anybody who should be paying tax should be paying tax.
So has Labour moved away from the position 5 years ago where it was okay to avoid tax?
It's not okay to avoid tax, and I think our party and the direction that it's going is quite strongly against tax avoidance. That's going to be at the heart of our financial plan.
I just asked because the HSBC stuff did happen under, I think it was Blair or Brown.
Well, that's true, but we've got a different party in place now with bold and radical policies that are definitely going to look at reforming the banking system that was in place at the time of the financial crash. And I'd like to just highlight to people, the myth that you hear about the financial crash. It wasn't Labour and it wasn't the UK that caused the global financial recession. It was greed. It was a casino banking system.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give the other candidates a chance to speak. So, Charlie, where do you...
Well, my stance on it is I pay taxes and so should everybody else. And if they've got the wealth, then they should pay on the nail.
Even if that means driving party donors out?
Too right.
Right, okay.
Too right. Because I just, well, I'm sorry, but that's a fact. You know, why should somebody evade paying taxes just because he gives a party a couple of £100 here and there and everywhere, and takes them all out to a nice lunch and takes them out for a tea and things like that? That's rubbish. That's rubbish.
Okay, and Greg, where do you?
I think it's interesting, Rebecca distancing herself from the Blair years, which is, I don't know whether you find that interesting, I do. You know, Tony Blair was the pin-up boy of Labour. He actually was Labour's longest serving Prime Minister. He actually made the Labour Party electable, and it's convenient for you to distance yourself from him in that way. What this gentleman said here about unregulated capitalism, Blair, of course, was guilty of bringing in a form of unregulated capitalism into the Labour Party. And I think
where does the Conservative Party stand in it? Because you are in government now. Where would the Conservative Party's position on this is that yes, tax avoidance, obviously, if it's in any way unethical or illegal, needs to be eradicated. We need to work out ways of finding out loopholes where people get around the system. I personally feel that very strongly, because, you know, for it to be an equal playing field, we're all paying tax. Obviously, there's different levels of taxation. But actually to have ways of getting around that are actually unethical, and actually it's not acceptable. Fair enough. And quickly, Seamus, and we'll go very quickly to the audience.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting how time and again we've heard both the Liberal Democrat and particularly the Labour candidate refer to my own personal view, and sheepishly having to distance themselves from their official policy or their party's checkered past. If I can come back to your original question, you've hit the nail on the head. And hey-ho, I can quote quite happily UKIP official policy on this. It's very simple. At present, big multinationals are taxed on their profits. What people like Amazon and Starbucks are doing is using a foreign company to charge fees to the British company. So the British company has tiny profits, so we hardly get any tax out of them. UKIP policy is to have a tax not on profits, but on turnover, so that if you make if you generate £1, 2, 3 billion or whatever in this country, that's what you pay tax on, not on an artificially reduced profit level.
Come to the audience for points only, please, if that's so. Yes.
Yes, I have a really quick point to make. Rather than attacking each other, because it's getting quite boring attacking each other, rather than attacking each other, I would like you guys to say what your parties are actually going to do. So that's the point.
The main reason I asked this is because I'm still paying £3,000 because I swapped over courses. I had an issue. I'm still in the £3,000 bracket. I'm still studying at the same level as people who are paying £9,000, and I'm having the same level of education. The price has improved, but the quality of teaching hasn't.
Right, so
There's
we
a disparity there.
very quickly address this when I do ask you, can you please stick to your own party's views, or how you would vote if you were elected. Please do not comment on other parties' views. Just to Emma.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's basically I'm paying less.
Standards have dropped. So is that what you're trying to say? The standard of
basically,
teaching
yeah, the standard hasn't gone up. The teaching's exactly the same. The system's still the same. We still have the same problems. Stuff's been improved, but we're paying more. That's my issue.
The Green Party has a comprehensive education policy starting with preschool and going all the way up to university that we would improve standards in all areas, as well as eliminating the tuition fees at university level. So you can find that on our website. If you Google Green Party policy, you can find it.
Okay, where does Labour stand?
Well, I mean, if you're thinking about tuition fees, I mean, it's a hypothetical amount of money that you're borrowing. You're not actually physically giving £9,000 per year of your own money and putting it into the educational system. It relies on you earning enough in years to come to be able to pay it back, to pay back the public purse, as it were. And at the rate we're going at the moment, a lot of people leaving university aren't getting the kinds of jobs that they should be getting. They're going into low-skilled workplaces and being paid far below the levels that a university leaver should be getting paid. It's absolutely shocking. So firstly, we address the issue of rebalancing the economy and ensuring that people have decent jobs to go to, decently paid jobs that are well above the living wage and suit the degree that you actually have. Secondly, we ensure that we skill up the rest of the workforce that don't want to go to university, because you shouldn't have to go to university to have a future. They should pick up on your skills at school, and that's why the Labour Party is introducing a technical baccalaureate for those who want to go into a skilled job.
Right, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off again to give the others time. So, Charlie, what would you do to ensure standards remain the same value for money, effectively?
Well, the thing that I'm finding difficult here, I've come along here tonight to obviously answer questions and things like that. But I'm standing as a Liberal Democrat for Salford. It's me. It's not the Liberal Democrats. It's not the Labour Party. It's not the Conservatives. It's not UKIP. It's Charlie Briggs. I'm here to take everything what you were saying in, and if I am elected, I will go down to Westminster. I won't have my brain taken out on the train going down there, which a lot of MPs do. You know, when they get into, you know, they promise you loads and loads of things, but when they get to be the MP on the train from Salford down to London, somebody gets on and they take the brain out. And when they get down there, they start towing the party line. Well, I'm sorry, Charlie Briggs doesn't toe any party line. Charlie Briggs is for the people what support him and who voted for him. And if you want me to go down to Westminster and you want me to argue your corner on tuition fees and that lot, you vote for me and I will do exactly that.
Even if it means standing up to the party leaders?
Yes. And it is on record that I have stood up against Nick Clegg and the other people.
Okay,
I've even stood in a lift with Mr. Eric Pickles, and I'll tell you, he's not a very nice man.
Continue.
Only to say, I'm surprised that, Charlie, you're not an independent, if that's the case, because that sounds, we'd all love to make a little speech like that. But the fact is there's an element to which we do represent our parties, otherwise we wouldn't have chosen to take the ticket. Yeah, absolutely, but it's a balancing act, isn't it, of the constituents and the parties, both. So, but with respect to that, the question there in terms of standard, I'm really glad to know that standards haven't gone down. Obviously, the increase of tuition fees was never ever said ideologically that was because standards were going up. So it was simply that the costings in terms of the economy was decided to put tuition fees up. So it was never linked to standards.
Could you understand how people feel they should be getting more for paying?
No, not in the sense that there was never the thing, right, we're going to put tuition fees up and therefore the standard of education is going higher. I'm glad that your experience is that it's not gone down, and I think I'm very good.
Price went up and the quality.
I thought it would remain the same.
Sorry,
it's pretty much the same. We still have the same problems, but it's like it's a brilliant experience. I love university life, but there are still problems there. But I don't see why I've spent 4 years paying £3,000 a year, and I've paid less than somebody doing my course for 2 years.
Right, okay, and Seamus, very briefly on standards.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It's a ridiculous anomaly, and you know, you're just lucky that you were in the year group that you were in, and I feel sorry for the people that came after you. It's so grossly unfair, and you know, I'm proud not to have to disown my party. I'm proud to be able to say UKIP in government would abolish tuition fees for the STEM subjects. With regard to your point about all of us arguing...
Right, I'm afraid I am going to have to stop you because we are running out of time for this question. We have gone on this question for quite a bit. We're going to have to move on to get all the other questions in. So, Jason Herbert has a question, I believe.
How can parties justify the reducing of the defence budget when there is a serious and varied threat to the UK and its citizens?
Justifying cuts to defence budget when there's a serious and varied threat to the UK. So we'll start on UKIP and work our way along.
Thanks. Well, we don't justify it at all, and we do recognise, you know, that the world today is probably the most dangerous it's ever been since the late 1930s. There's stuff going on in Eastern Europe. There's horrendous stuff going on in the Middle East. And UKIP policy can best be summed up as speak softly, but carry a big stick. That was a phrase that was coined by an early 20th century American president, Theodore Roosevelt. And basically, the NATO floor spending target is supposed to be 2%. The Conservative and Liberal Democrat governments have let that slide, and it's getting worse.
So would UKIP keep the 2% target?
Yes.
And if I can ask, how would you pay for it? Keeping in mind we do have a massive deficit still, it does need to be.
Well, absolutely. Well, you may be aware that a law was passed recently that commits us to spending 0.7% of GDP on foreign aid, and we would slash that budget because so much of it is wasteful spending. It's going to corrupt foreign governments. It's going to a country like India, which has its own space program. It's going to Argentina, which has leased bombers from Russia and fighters from Argentina with which to attack the British Falkland Islands. So, there's savings to be made there. Our core policy is to leave the EU. That will save us at least £10 billion a year. So we are the only party that is explicitly anti-war.
Right, okay,
We'd stay out of war, but build up our defences to keep us safe.
Greg, Conservative Party and defence cuts.
Well, for some people, the fact there has been defence cuts under the Conservative watch is slightly anomalous because obviously defence has always been a major part of Conservative policy. But to answer your question in terms of the justification for that, I've got a friend of mine who's very senior in the Navy, he's just retired actually, very senior in the Navy, in the intelligence side of the Navy. And talking to him, what he says to me, very much, and he's been in the mainstream Navy before he specialised in intelligence, is that, simply put, the nature of the threat has changed. It's absolutely right. No one would argue that we're more secure than we've ever been. In some ways, there's more insecurity. But the nature of the threat has changed. So, one of the big threat, of course, one of the big threats is global jihadism. And, to actually fight that with a conventional army or conventional forces is actually, it's not going to work in that way. So actually, the nature of the threat has changed. And so actually, we've had to...
Is that now
that's
why
been the
we've
justification.
got a £6 billion worth of aircraft carriers, but no aircraft on them? What's the justification behind that? Surely it makes sense to, if you're going to have aircraft carriers, to have aircraft on them.
Sure. Well, the Conservative Party has never said that we don't need conventional forces, but just it was answering this gentleman's question directly to say that the nature has changed. We need to start thinking sideways and creatively about other ways in which to combat the threat that there is.
Right. And where do the Liberal Democrats stand on this, Jai?
Well, it's a little bit difficult for me to answer this because as a father of a serving soldier who tells me every time I see him that the government are cutting back, and we're now at a point where we really are a militia more than anything else. I think it's wrong, and if I have my way, I'd be trying to pump more money into the serving soldiers, getting more soldiers on the ground instead of trying to come up with reservists and take people from the streets. I think it's very, very important that Britain has a strong army, strong navy and strong air force. And the only way to do it is to build them back up again.
And the same question I asked Seamus, where would you get the other money from?
Well, again, I'm not into, I do feel that we are paying monies out of this country where we shouldn't be, and we should come back on that and actually...
You're referring to the foreign aid?
Yeah, but the unfortunate bit about it, those are the rules and we've got to stick by them.
Right, fair enough.
Or we could change them.
Well, we've committed to a review on defence spending, and I think it's very important that we look at the issue here. Now, nobody likes war, I'm pretty sure of that. And I think we need to look globally at how we can deal diplomatically with situations, rather than steaming in to conflicts that really are no business of ours. I would like to see our defence services bolstered from a humanitarian perspective so that they can help within the country whenever there's a crisis in flooding and other kind of situations of that nature. And I think we need to be thinking outside the box in what we can actually do with our security personnel at the moment.
And the Greens?
Well, I think it's relatively well known that the biggest cut the Greens want to make to defence is Trident. I consider Trident to be relatively superfluous. If you press that button, someone else is going to fire back at you and we're all dead. I don't want to see that kind of scenario being pushed aggressively. I believe that the best defense is to understand other countries and the conflicts that they have and the reasons that they may have conflict with us. I believe this is also a resolution to any issues that we may have with overpopulation. People are coming here because their home is not good. We want to find out how we can help them there as well as here.
Without meaning to be facetious, when you say dealing and trying to understand other people, does that include ISIS and other groups such as that, or what would you do?
Everyone has a motive. If we can know why they are doing this, we can try and convince them or try and reason or prevent other people from going down that same path at the very least. I do believe that that everything like this has a trigger. There's got to be a cause for...
I'll take some questions from the audience. There's been a hand up here for a while.
Salford's a working class town, city, sorry, yeah, it's a city. We're all going to education, we're not going to come out into working class jobs, hopefully. But you have to go further afield than Salford. I'm basically asking what you're going to do for the graduate in Salford.
Right. Does this relate to the question on defence?
No, I'm just completely going off on something else.
Right, well, I'm afraid we won't answer. Does anyone have a question on defence? Yes.
Since you mentioned defence, why are you not talking about cybersecurity?
Sorry?
Why are you not talking about cybersecurity, considering that is the main threat at the moment?
Which was the point I was trying to make in terms of the broader canvas.
All right, that's by diversifying. Where does UKIP stand on cybersecurity? Are you all conventional, or what would you do with the money?
You know, we need to keep abreast of all threats, no matter what shape or form they come in. I think that the Armed Forces recently have developed a specialist cybersecurity section. You know, that's all part of a strong defence. But to deal with the wider picture, we have to turn ourselves into a country that doesn't poke its nose into other people's business all the time so that they won't want to attack us in the first place. You know, UKIP believes in Britain, a Britain that takes care of business and a Britain that minds its own business so that we won't have to go and fight these wars, cold wars, shooting wars, or cyber wars.
Again, I'll ask you the same question I asked for Greens. What about ISIS? Would you see those as, them as a threat to Britain? What would you do with them? Would you say that it needs a military response?
Are not just a threat to Britain, they are a threat to universal civilization. They are worse and more dangerous than the Nazis. They are the biggest threat.
Well, we sent troops to fight the Nazis. Would you send troops to fight ISIS if you were in charge? Or?
I would like us to bolster the forces in place locally that are fighting them. I think it is absolutely ridiculous that we are demonizing, for example, secular President Assad of Syria. He's a man who speaks fluent English, wears a suit, is a London-trained eye doctor, has a British wife with British citizen children.
But he is a dictator.
And a murderous dictator. I find this...
Well, if we cannot do business with someone like that, I think we need our heads examined. You know,
okay,
with dictators like the King of Saudi Arabia, perhaps. Is that more your cup of tea? You know, we need to deal...
Yeah, right, Greg,
let's support those who are in battle
already. Sorry,
already.
we're going to have to cut you off, Greg.
Yeah, sorry, I do find the idealism on both extremes of this row somewhat naive, just in terms of... And also, you know, your comments about the fact he wears a suit and he speaks English well, I mean, that perhaps is representing some of the ideology of your party. President Assad is a murderous dictator who used poison nerve gas on his own people.
Well,
we were on the verge, as Western nations, remember, Obama, we were on the verge of actually attacking them, when actually the whole game changed, and actually it was recognised that some of the insurgents who were fighting the Assad regime, which was pretty evil, were themselves just as bad, if not worse. And then the configuration of what we now call IS or ISIS came into being. So I don't think... I certainly wouldn't vindicate Assad, but equally, the nature of the threat from ISIS is global, it affects all of us, and actually I think retreating into a kind of little England mentality that it doesn't affect us is not the way forward.
So why would you would have to bolster the armed forces, you'd have to spend more on them, and you've cut them, so what, I don't get how that links. You say they're a threat, but you've cut, your government has cut them.
The cuts are part of a bigger picture in terms of actually, we're talking about education, and it's balancing the budget. There's not enough money for, you know, we need to work within our means to do everything. The fact is there are conventional forces, and there are conventional forces available that could be used against the ISIS threat at the moment. But right now, the policy of the government has been, the coalition government has been, that where possible, we should actually work with some of the groups that in the area, some of the local groups, the indigenous groups who are committed to fighting the threat of ISIS and actually limiting our attacks to airstrikes and not boots on the ground.
So very, Charlie, you're...
Yeah, well, we are sending troops out to all these countries. We are sending small bands of guys out there and girls to look after our interest out there. All right, a lot of it's under the radar because it has to be, you know, and good luck to these guys, because I do feel that this ISIS and they are a threat, and what that gentleman said on the end there has just blew my head off. How he can sit there and back that gentleman, and I call him gentleman loosely because we're on the internet. I'm bewildered. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to again very briefly with
In terms of
ISIS
ISIS being a threat, I think they're certainly a threat, but it's not as black and white as some of my colleagues would like to make out. Unfortunately, ISIS is joining together with other factions in certain parts of the world, which makes it quite a murky political situation, with us having to kind of think twice about getting involved. And that's why I cited that a diplomatic way forward is always the first course of action. We need to act very carefully, and we shouldn't be gung-ho about this because it's a very complicated situation.
Do you think you can act diplomatically with people who burn people alive and chop their heads off?
I think we need to act, you know, under the radar. The difficult position that we've got with ISIS is that it's not a clear-cut situation in terms of they're there, let's go and find them and sort them out. It's not as simple as that, unfortunately. I think we need to start at home. We need to start ensuring that parts of our communities don't feel marginalised and that we don't allow people with, you know, extremist views to take root in our communities. And that involves a strategy of community cohesion that we really need to work hard on, and it seems to have lost its way in the last few years.
Again, due to time, we have to stop there. So very briefly,
I just want to quickly clarify my previous statement was that all negative behavior, while everyone is ultimately responsible for their own actions, there are some triggering factors for negative behavior. Poverty can increase crime rate, for example. So we have to learn and understand the triggering factors for these extremist behaviors, and that can prevent the next generation of them from rising. Obviously, we do have to deal with the ones that exist, but
would you bomb them? Would you send troops in? How would you deal with them?
I am not that well versed on defence, and personally, I would expect someone else in the party could answer that question much better.
Okay.
But
fair enough. It's okay. I'll quickly come to 2 points from there and there, please. So the gentleman and then the lady.
Yeah, this is for you down on the end. I don't know your name, don't really care.
Emma Van Dyke, please don't
Green
be
Party
rude.
treats Trident nuclear weapons like they're just conventional. They're just another weapon. It's just another big gun. The whole point of it is to stop it from being used. We're one of 5 countries on Earth that will never be nuked, because we not only have nuclear weapons but also the ability to use them. That's the point of nuclear weapons, not so that we can say, oh yes, we're going to nuke you. It means that they will never ever nuke us.
Right, okay,
we can
I'm afraid I'm
nuke
going
them
to have
back.
to stop you there due to time constraints. And the lady next to you.
Okay, I was just going to ask, what would you think is the best way to deal with radicalization at home? And I think, Emma, you've
I'm so
answered
sorry,
that already.
we really don't have time. There are other topics to discuss for questions. So as we're running out of time, we'll have a question from Twitter, which I do have here. In February, we saw a 10th shooting in Salford in the space of 9 months. What would you do to improve the safety of students in Salford? So we'll start off with Emma.
Well, the long-term plan would be to improve the prospects for everyone in the area, because as I just said, poverty is a major triggering factor to crime. So that would be the long-term solution. In the short term, I would, actually I'm not sure about short term. Like I said, I'm not that well versed on military defense, and
this is more of a policing issue, I think.
yes, it's not really
issue,
not my area of expertise, I'm afraid.
Okay, Rebecca, what would Labour do?
Well, I think we've seen horrific cuts to police services over the last few years. We've also seen a lot of outsourcing and privatisation of police services, such as CSI investigations and the like. And I think that's shocking. Labour would be committed to eradicating the costly police and crime commissioner so that money could be put back into community policing to assist people on the streets. Again, I'll go back to the point about ensuring that those with the broadest shoulders actually bear the greatest burden to ensure that that money and the tax avoidance and the tax that we would recoup would go back into public services, that we could put it back into the police force. But also, I think you raise a very important point, Emma, in terms of poverty. And it's about ensuring that Salford becomes a fantastic place to be so that our children and our youth don't get drawn into gangs and drugs and crime, because they've actually got a future. They've got either a technical skill to build on or an academic skill to build on. And I mean, I haven't got time to talk through all the policies that Labour has for that, but we do have some fantastic policies. So if you have time, Google them tonight.
Okay, then.
Thanks.
And Charlie, police forces, or how would you improve the safety of students from crime?
Just over the last 24 hours, I think we've just seen that there's been 3 stabbings in Salford, and I really feel for the families. I stood in Burnley as an exec member for community safety. I worked very, very closely with the police for a good number of years. I understand that they're being cut back, and what I would like to see is that more bobbies on the beat, more feet on the pavements. Probably what we need to do is have an amnesty, get the guns and the knives off the streets for a start off, and really start getting down to the nitty-gritty and stopping these gangs and patrolling the streets and making them more secure.
And that would mean more police officers, actually.
Yes.
Well, just a brief fact is since 2010, Greater Manchester Police has lost 1,100 police officers, leaving only just 6,800 people. So, Greg, what would you do to improve student safety and policing?
I think looking at the crime stats, it seems that those one of the reasons we're citing those things, it seems fairly anomalous in terms of the crime rate in terms of violent crime like that is normally not as intensely high as that. So one would certainly hope that that's anomalous and not start of a new pattern in any way. But what I would say is that in terms of the funding that we have, and we could make party political points about that, it's not just the funding that we have, but how that money is spent. And I think that what has happened in the police force, and it's not just the police force, I think it's other spheres as well, there's been excessive bureaucracy, and I certainly would like to see the money spent less in terms of some of the bureaucratic mechanisms, and actually more in terms of having policemen on the beat, and in terms of community police projects, whereby there's more of a visible presence in the community.
Community support officers? Or?
Community support officers, alongside actually having police officers in the traditional format on the beat, yeah.
Do you think community police support officers are good value for money, considering they don't have powers of arrest?
I think they while they don't have the kind of all the full power and authority of a policeman, yeah, I think they do have an effect, and I think they are a reassuring presence in the community.
Fair enough. And Seamus, what would you do to protect?
Well, UKIP believes in small government and low taxes, letting you keep as much of your own hard-earned money as possible. But there are 2 primary responsibilities of the state in any system of government, and those are number 1, defence of the realm, and number 2, law and order, so that ordinary decent people, including students, may walk up and down the streets in safety. And the current government has really taken their eye off the ball with both of those. Now, with regard to what's going on locally, I think we need to divert money from other realms, spending on the EU, spending on foreign aid, for example, and refocus it on defence and policing. Now, I also would need to question on a very local basis what's actually going on with Greater Manchester Police. I've had some very bad experiences of reporting something via a 999 operator, only for the police person who eventually turned up to be clueless. The message wasn't passed on properly, and the culprits were able to swan off. And only yesterday I was coming home from the city centre on the number 67 bus, and the bus was stopped, and 4 police officers got on 2 PCs and 2 PCSOs, and they were acting as bodyguards for a ticket inspector. Well, I'm sorry, but that bus company, if they feared violence for the ticket inspector, they should have had their own private security guards there.
So
that's not what we're paying our police for.
Increasing police officers on the beat?
The ones that we do have, they should be out on the beat, not protecting private interests like the bus companies.
Fair enough. Any questions on keeping that? Yes.
With crime being an issue and an increasing and less police on the streets, like you were saying, the lady from the Greens was saying about poverty being an issue, the benefits being cut to the poorest in society, is that not a cause of crime on the rise?
Well, I think actually all the statistics show that crime is falling. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for a number of years, crime has been going down across the board. I do take your point about poverty, particularly with people suffering benefit cuts and sanctions. There is a crying need for something to be done. And I personally, for example, am involved in a food bank project. I go to the constituency where I'm standing once a week, Bury South, and actually bring food back for distribution here in Salford and Eccles, where I live. But there are. It's not right to. Never bought into this Labour thing. Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. There are rich people that commit crimes, and there are very poor people who are honest and live decent lives. So I don't think there's a direct correlation.
Okay, I'm going to have to
those
stop
are
you
two
and let
separate
the
issues.
other candidates respond. So, Greg, on that issue.
I think, with respect, I think I would challenge the presupposition of the question as well, just in the sense of, clearly, in absolute terms, poverty could be a contributory factor to crime. In its extreme form, in terms of literally people can't afford to feed themselves, and they're forced by necessity to do that. But actually, in terms of the situations of hardship that we see in this country, are relative to other places in the world, which are much more significant, much more severe. And there are many. Obviously, the majority of, one would hope, honest working people would not allow their personal circumstances to lead them to commit crime. And in the same way, I just agree with what you just said there, in terms of there are obviously many rich people who commit crime in ways that are, hidden, in terms of, we were talking about illegal tax avoidance before, but all kinds of other ways in which people commit crime and they get away with it. They're simply not caught.
And would you say this is due to a lack of police officers or a lack of will on politicians? I mean, recently we've seen child abuse scandals covered up for years, and what would you do to change that if you feel rich and poor people should be treated equally?
Of course, absolutely, rich and poor people should be treated equally. That goes without saying. But I think the child abuse things that have come out recently, obviously the horrific thing is that we can trace them back through successive governments. Then obviously we can't make a party political point of that.
Sorry, the point I was trying to make is junior police officers did try to investigate, and they were told from whoever was in charge at the time, don't do this.
Absolutely.
What would you do to stop that?
Something has significantly gone wrong there in terms of, if anyway, we're talking about particularly the Cyril Smith case in terms of where there seemed to be a cover-up that was in the news recently. And actually, I think that the government, whichever government will be in power beyond May the 7th, needs to follow that through and do everything within the power to make sure that, if what seems to have happened, where there's an abuse of power and people, because of their position of influence and prestige in society, they actually got off scot-free. That needs challenging. There's something deeply wrong about that.
Right, okay, I'll let Charlie come in now.
Yeah, I agree partly with yourself about that. The Cyril Smith affair and Jimmy Savile, horrendous, absolutely horrendous, and that should have been sorted out many, many years ago.
Do you feel there's something in the police which allows covering up, or do you feel...
Yes, there is. It's a lot of people kept saying, well, it's Freemasonry and things like that. A lot of policemen, inspectors and people were in the Freemasons, so if you give you a handshake at one particular point, everybody knew who you were, and you could get away with blue murder. That's rubbish, but that's what was mooted around. I think what we need to do is to make the police force more powerful and make sure that there's more bobbies on the beat and stop them going around in cars all the time. Get people out there Get them out there.
When you say more powerful, you mean more officers, not more powers to
Yes,
senior officers?
yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah, more officers.
Right, okay. Rebecca?
Just to go back to the gentleman's point about poverty being linked to crime, I don't think you can escape the fact that poverty is linked to crime. I don't remember any of the cast of Made in Chelsea running around in drugs gangs and shooting each other, yet it happens in certain parts of Salford where the children struggle and they don't have a future. And until we change that fundamental principle that people should be able to aspire to whatever they want, regardless of their economic background, we're going to see crime in certain areas. And we need to address the economic problem, not just put more police on the beat.
So would you say that crime in, say, the City of London, is that a priority for Labour? Or
crime in the City of London?
Say, tax avoidance and stuff. Would you investigate that as well? Because it's not just poverty which causes it.
Oh no, all forms of crime. Unfortunately, we see more people being put in prison for, claiming fraudulent benefits than we do from people avoiding tax, and that's a sad fact. And I think we need to put a lot more effort and energy into targeting these wealthy individuals, like the likes of the HSB lot, that were avoiding tax on a massive scale. I think there was only one of the people involved in the HSB scandal that have actually been brought to justice yet.
That would need more officers to investigate those crimes. So you'd be putting more police.
Well, that's right. Well, as I've mentioned, we're scrapping police and crime commissioners so that we can put more funds into our police force to encourage, more bobbies on the beat and more back room personnel.
Okay, fair enough. And Emma, the Greens on.
Well, it's my personal opinion, and this is a generalization, so it wouldn't apply to everyone. But generally speaking, the people in poverty will commit a crime out of desperation, whereas people who have money, who are better off, will commit crime out of a sense of entitlement, a sense that they will not get caught. They are too rich to go to jail. They're too big to fail. So I think both of these issues need to be looked at from different angles because they are different causes. And I do believe that if we can deal with, eliminate or reduce poverty, we can help reduce crime in poorer areas because they won't be poorer areas anymore. But at the same time, we need to dig into and put more effort into combating crime with wealthy individuals who are just bribing people or whatever it is they're doing to get off from the crime. Yeah.
Okay, well, I will take 2 points, very brief points, no questions. So you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, Seamus, you were saying that with the food banks project, that you help out with that. Surely that there shouldn't be a need to help out with food banks because there should not be food banks.
Did I see another hand up from us?
Sorry, can I just address that?
No, I'm afraid we are seriously running out of time. Is that it? No more? Oh, sorry, very quickly.
There are a lot of already present sources that have been made, like Clare's Law for domestic abuse. You can contact people and basically get in touch with the police if you're fearing that your partner has been in an abusive relationship before. But I feel like this isn't really advertised that well. A lot of people, barely anybody knows about it, and it's a really great resource. I feel like if you were to get elected or something, especially in this area as where it was introduced, it should be something that you should promote.
Right, okay, thank you. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you all for turning up, and thank you to our panel for coming along. Can you give them a round of applause, please? I hope you've enjoyed yourselves, and good night.